Welcome back, Honors Western Civ. This is Mr. Terry, broadcasting to you from the floor in my house so I can mush my dog's face a little bit. We're here to talk today about Mesopotamia, the first civilization, the earliest civilization, the cradle of civilization. Now, the reason why we're here to talk about that and discuss it in the first place is we have to understand where civilization started, and this is the original. And we also have to understand, by studying Mesopotamia, we can really comprehend the essential parts of a civilization. What you need for one, how do you keep one running, how do you supply for your citizens, how do you do all of these things. So let's go ahead and get started though. So you probably blindly accepted a lot of things about it when you were in elementary school. You heard that they had city-states, but you didn't even really know what a city-state was. And you heard it was also known as the Fertile Crescent. Let's start there, okay? Fertile Crescent, let's break that down. It's this nickname. It's what it's also known as, okay? It's AKA, if you will. Now, fertile, of course, means the ability to produce great amounts of crops and vegetative life that we can actually use as a group of people. Now, here, that's easy, though. Everybody knows what fertile means. So let's talk about the crescent idea, though. This is a geographical question. Does anybody know why it's called a crescent? Well, do you? Jules, Max, y'all know? All right, well, it's a decent answer, but let's talk about that for a second. It's called a crescent because of the shape that it makes on the map between the two rivers, okay? So the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers start towards the Mediterranean Sea, very narrowly close together, and then they expanded, and then they came back and emptied into the Persian Gulf. So it's called the Fertile Crescent due to the shape that the area of the fertile land makes from a satellite perspective. I'll show you that in a minute, though, so you can see the crescent shape. Now, it is the earliest of all civilizations. It formed its first permanent settlements over 3,000 years ago. Now, Mesopotamia is actually a Greek word, of course, because we're Western Civ. We're going to call it Mesopotamia because we like the Greeks. Now, it means between two rivers. Now, that specifically means the areas between the Tigris and the Euphrates River. Now, again, everybody's heard of the Tigris and Euphrates. You've heard of the Nile. You've heard of all those things before. But did you know that that area is in present-day Iraq? See, this is another thing. A lot of teachers don't like to teach geography anymore, but I eat that stuff up, okay? So the Tigris and the Euphrates River in present-day Iraq. And also, here's another thing, real quick. Mesopotamia is not a country. It's not one entity. It was a number of independently operating city-states. It's a region. Mesopotamia is a whole area, consisted of some of the most famous empires of all time, especially the most famous one that's mentioned in the Bible heavily, Babylon. Also Samaria. The Assyrians were there at one point. So it's very important that we understand that it's actually an area, not just one specific group of people. So anyway, it lasted approximately 3,000 years, which is insane. When you think about it, that is a long time. How long has the U.S. been? I tell you what, extra credit opportunity. The first one of y'all to come to me tomorrow morning and tell me how long the United States has been around as a country to compare our growth to that of Mesopotamia, I'll give you extra credit, all right? On your first test grade, I'll give you 2 points. Now, also, its people were the first to irrigate their crops using a very easy irrigation system of ditches and dikes. And I'll show you in class tomorrow exactly what that looks like, all right? But just know that irrigation is a system of moving water over great distances so it can be readily available for any use. Also, they devised a system of writing, which we'll heavily look at today. It's called cuneiform. Go ahead and write that down. Write it down now because I don't know if I put the word in there specifically. Cuneiform is C-U-N-E-I-F-O-R-M, cuneiform, all right? Also known as Sanskrit as well. Anyway, it's a system of writing. They developed the first parts of mathematics, right? They did the base mathematics. Now, Egyptians created the first fractions, hooray, but we'll talk about them later on. They also invented the very first systems of wheels, plows, and learned to work with metal. We talked about the Iceman today. The Iceman was carrying a copper axe, right? So who's to say the Iceman didn't come in contact with these people, or at least his group, right? Because not everybody knew how to work with metal, right? I mean, this is something that is like a relatively, in the history of the world, 4 billion year old planet, and we've just figured out how to access this stuff. But now we do amazing things with it. Anyway, so as you can see right here on the map, Mesopotamia and the Fertile Crescent, as you can see, starts on the left side over here, goes all the way up and around and creates a crescent moon shape. That's why it's called the Fertile Crescent. So, Tigris and Euphrates rivers right there. It is close by to Jerusalem in the Israel area, and Egypt is right down there to the west. Yeah, to the west. So, it's really sad too that a lot of people don't even realize that Egypt's in Africa. It's pitiful. So, anyway, geographic conditions. Let's talk about. Hi, Josie. How are you? Just so y'all know, this is my fiance's dog. Josie, speak. Give me howdy. Okay, not bad. I guess you're not that dumb. All right, anyway, so geographic conditions. First of all, there's a very little amount of rainfall. It's a rough place to start, right? It's very hot. It's very dry. Okay, very arid climate. Sandy, dust storms, wind storms, leaving muddy river valleys in the winter, and very, very nasty stuff. Catastrophic flooding and rivers in the spring, like knocking out whole villages and stuff like that. Arid soil with very little minerals in general. No stone or timber resources. Well, wait a minute. Let's go back to this real fast. Who the heck wants to live in that? Well, here's the thing. They hit it at the right time. Why live in Mesopotamia? These things called natural levees. So make sure you write down what a natural levee is and why it was beneficial to them. So anyway, a natural levee, as you can see right here, you can draw this up if you want, just so you can better understand it. You need to know what a levee is. So a levee, over time, and as these rivers flooded, and as they dumped soil and they left this stuff behind, it built up, and made a huge embankment, as you can see right there. So you could actually put your town on top of it if you chose. And the great thing about it is this entire levee, this giant hunk of dirt, has got fantastic amounts of minerals in it. It's got a lot of good stuff for growing crops with. So it creates a high and safe floodplain, makes irrigation and canal construction stupid easy, provides protection, and then the surrounding swamps were full of fish and waterfowl for hunting. Reeds provided food for sheep and goats. Reeds also were used for building resources. I mean, like, this really set them up to be in a good spot. So, let's talk about the history of Mesopotamia as well. Over the centuries, many different people lived in this area, creating a collection of independent states, okay? Those states are also called a city-state. I'm not going to tell you to write down city-state, because by this point in high school, you should already know what one is. But just in case you don't, a city-state is a located area that is autonomous. They have their own government, and it includes the main city and then the surrounding towns and villages, okay? So it's an independent governmental unit. Now, Mesopotamia, as we know, is a region. It's not a country. It's a region, okay? Had a ton of city-states inside of it. So Sumer was one of them. It was in the most southern part. It was the earliest. It was very early successful. And it went from 3500 to 2000 BC. I don't say BCE. I'm not that politically correct. So just knock that off. The Akkad, or the Akkadians, led by Sargon I, Sargon the Great, northern part was from 2340 BC to 2180 BC. Little short time span. Hopefully that doesn't happen to the U.S., right? Now, Babylon, the big dog, right? The most famous one. These two regions were actually unified Babylonia. They conquered the entire Fertile Crescent area, from 1830 to 1500 BC, and also from 650 to 500 BC. And then the last one was the Assyrian Empire. These crazy, insane warriors that were well documented for like bleeding people out in streams after they would conquer certain amounts of area. So we'll talk about those guys in order as we go. Here's the most important thing to understand right now, though. Every civilization has to have a system of writing. You can't be a civilization without a system of writing. That's the reason why they're first, is because they did it first, okay? Some of you are like, why do you have to know how to write? To live together. Writing transcends groups, and it concentrates you. It gives you the ability to move messages, to move information, to actually take all the surrounding area and consolidate it into one hardcore unit, okay? If we couldn't read and write, how could we relay messages from our governmental officials to its people? maybe these days we can get away with TV, but still, you have to know. In this point in time, if you didn't have reading and writing, you couldn't do anything. So, development of writing was huge because it originally started as pictograms. Now, a pictogram is a picture to show a meaning. For example, if I said the triangle means water, blah, that's a pictogram, okay? Now, an ideogram is a sign that represents specific words, so more than one concept or an idea. Now, an ideogram is, for example, the reason why this developed is because scribes began to combine certain pictures to create new ideas. For example, scribes in Mesopotamia actually started this whole trend going when they tried to address the idea of slave women. So what they did was they took the sign for women and they took the sign for mountain, because a lot of the Sumerians went and got their slaves from the mountainous areas and they combined them together. And then eventually those two images became one image, which is going to create the idea of an ideogram. Now, ideograms then gave way to phonetics. Now, we have a phonetic alphabet. Now, phonetic alphabet. Phon is actually derived from the Phoenician people, and phonetics is the idea of a sign representing not an idea, not a word, but a sound. For example, A is ah, B is b, C is k, right? That's a phonetic alphabet. So, phonetics are the basis of all writing systems today. So, writing. I know I'm cutting you off a little bit right here, but just listen, okay? Writing is the greatest contribution of the Mesopotamian civilization to Western Civ, and also it allowed particularly for the transmission of knowledge, the codification of laws, records to facilitate trade. We'll talk about the laws later on next week when we get to Hammurabi, and we talk about his code and how you could stab kids in the face, but you didn't get stabbed back. So Sumerians wrote on clay tablets, as you can see to your left here. Now, with the point of a reed, that's what they use as a stylus. Now, they then dried in the sun to make the tablet. So scribes were the only ones who could read and write, and they served as priests, record keepers, accountants, things like that. They would actually, one of the particular things that their job was to keep track of farm goods, to keep track of how many bales of hay, or not hay, they didn't have that, but you understand what I'm saying. Grain, particularly, recording grain surpluses. Because that's the thing, is how do we know how much is in our surplus if we can't write it down, right? So anyway, as a society, this evolved to the first form of writing, which developed, I did have it down here, it's cuneiform, meaning wedge-shaped. As you can see on the left-hand side, all of these symbols look like small differentiations of a triangle, right? So cuneiform was actually a system of triangles. When I used to teach in Durham, I used to literally get kids to draw in Play-Doh with this stuff so they could understand what it would possibly look like. Now, this dated all the way back to 3500 BCE. Cuneiform spread to Persia and Egypt and became the vehicle of growth and spread of civilization and the exchange of ideas and cultures. So thanks to the Mesopotamian people, civilization was able to blossom because people could actually confer ideas to one another. It coerced them into one idea and into one group and country. So this is huge. This is huge, right? Also, Mesopotamians, first schools ever, first formal schools. Mesopotamian education included a bunch of different things, but Sumerian writing was so complicated that scribes had to study for many years. Now, a scribe is a person who copies documents. They were very essential before the printer, and the printer wasn't even invented until 1450 by Johannes Gutenberg, right? I'm sure you guys knew that already, though. So, students were required to be two things: wealthy, and they had to be a boy, unfortunately. It was just one of those things. Scribe training was super strict, though. I don't know if you want to be in training to be a scribe. Scribes were often actually caned as a punishment. Now, cane is like a whipping, but it's with a stick, okay? So, this journal. Now, other subjects, though, that's not too educative, right? Scribal schools also I put fought on there. That's ridiculous. Also taught math, botany, which is the study of plant life. Of course, they're a fertile organization. They have to have that. And linguistics and literature. So they taught math, science, and English. I'm sure they had history as well, because we all know it's the best. These schools set the standard for all city-states and even those things. One strategy for taking these flipped lessons, actually, if you want to kind of get a leg up, put me on mute, okay, the first time around, pause it, copy the notes, and then you can just listen and follow along with it. Something I might think of, It's up to you, though. All right, I'll see y'all tomorrow. Have a great evening.